Hi, my name is Dheeraj. I'm the CTO and co-founder at mFilterit. And today joining me on this conversation is Anushri. Anushri is leading the e-commerce and digital marketing practice at ITC Foods. Welcome and glad to have you over, Anushri, on this conversation with us.
Thank you, Dheeraj.
And Anushri, I'm sure as COVID has come and has gone. It's really turned how e-commerce is looked at in organizations. ITC is a classic case of an offline online mix. I'm sure pre-COVID offline was the dominant focus area, and suddenly COVID would have made a lot of changes. How has this journey been, and how has COVID changed what you do in e-commerce at ITC?
Well, it's not that we were not really digital first or e-commerce first, before COVID hit us, but the pace got accelerated, to be honest, during COVID. While e-commerce would contribute to a substantial part of the revenues for various brands, especially the large ones. But with COVID hitting in, I think what got accelerated is the thinking which relates to kind of creating multiple touch points for consumers. So it's essentially was all about, being proximal to consumers. So in the beginning, we actually started with something called ITC Store on Wheels, which was essentially kind of really taking our products, and this is during lockdown one, where the consumers were not really allowed to step out at all. So Store on Wheels was a concept which was then really commended, that you were really kind of trying to reach out to consumers who are really, really worried about the fact that they will not be able to kind of have the essential supplies at home. So, Store on Wheels was a tie-up with various buildings and communities across key cities to kind of really make our products proximal to our consumers. That actually was the starting point. Then we had various alliances. We actually tied up with networks like, say, Domino's, to actually get our products to the consumers, because those were essential services which were essentially allowed, right? And then, of course, the conversation on ITC Store, which became like a legitimate business in itself within the last couple of years. So, and then e-commerce, actually, while, like I said, it was always important, we always knew that the next frontier is, or from a business perspective, is e-commerce, and there are many unknowns in e-commerce. E-commerce platforms themselves were actually evolving, so to speak.
Of course.
So I think during that, in the last couple of years, which is 2020 and 21, we actually scaled up e-commerce. We actually looked at what's working, what's not. How do we really set up our shops on e-commerce? How do we really, figure out what's working and what's not? And hence the role of, consistently monitoring, tracking, analyzing, and then coming up with a playbook of sorts. And the playbook essentially is not cast in stone, right? It is, again, a very, very evolving situation even today. And as we measure as we go, we analyze as we go, we arrive at our KPIs as we go. What was really important a couple of years back may not be important today. So I think COVID, so to speak, has speeded up or accelerated, like I said, the entire focus on digital at large and e-commerce specifically.
I'm glad you bring that up, because you are at a very interesting juncture of digital marketing and e-commerce, which is digital retail, right? Digital marketing brought in this whole focus of, the promise which digital marketing brought was that you can track, you can monitor, you can analyze every impression click, right? Compared to, say, a traditional media like TV or print, where, monitoring it was a problem. Similarly, e-commerce, you have your offline retail, which, you can only do so much in terms of data and in terms of market research. E-commerce brought in that every order, every transaction could be tracked and looked at, right? And then, so digital marketing and digital commerce or e-commerce, I think coming in together means that the whole point of data coming into the forefront, so that you can actually do a lot more analysis than what you would do in traditional retail or traditional marketing, kind of goes through that overhaul. But do you feel that organizations and are actually geared up to change the traditional retail mindset and bring in the whole benefit of digitalization on commerce as well? What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think organizations have understood the potential. I think there have been skeptics in the past that, does it, how much data is too much data? What is the actionable amount of insight that one can garner with so much of data, right? And also the categories that you operate in. And for us, traditional retail will never really go out of focus, or modern trade will never go out of focus. And at the same time, e-commerce is kind of taking center stage, which is becoming kind of adding to the entire ecosystem of the different touch points that the consumers have access to our products from. So I think organizations have suddenly understood the potential of e-commerce and digital. And I think it's not silos. So I think one of the key conversations that happens in ITC now is how do we really break those silos? Digital is not a different animal. E-commerce is not removed from it. Consolidation of media interventions is the key. How do we really capitalize? For example, if you are live on, say, TV and digital and doing some upper funnel, how do you really consolidate and kind of really see the funnel forming across more trackable platforms like direct-to-consumer and marketplaces, right? E-commerce marketplaces. So I think the conversations are becoming a little more convergent, a little more, to how do we really kind of really connect the dots? It's not about collecting a whole lot of data, of course, that's important, but what is that actionable level of insight that you get from, the different points of data or consumer journeys, so to speak? There are, for example, we work with you closely, Dheeraj, right, to kind of really cull out how the consumer is behaving, how the different moving parts of e-commerce are really, probably impacting our business or impacting our market shares on multiple platforms. Is e-commerce visibility also enabling, shelf offtake on traditional retail? Because today e-commerce platforms are audience hubs in their own right? So I think the conversation is about breaking silos when it comes to digital and data. How do we connect the dots and consolidate what we actually read across platforms, and then come up with probably those 4 or 5 things? And I think it's very, very similar to what it used to be. Maybe it was applicable for a different kind of a touch point. Now the same principle gets adapted at scale, perhaps on platforms like e-commerce. So I think so I don't think there is a drastic shift, but yeah, the ways of doing things have drastically changed. And you've really probably seen how the consumer themselves is evolving. And I don't know if you remember that probably the critical mass of newer consumers who got added to e-commerce were either the really young ones or the people who were actually above 50. And so I think simplification of consumer journeys is probably the buzzword that you will hear in corridors of larger organizations like ours.
No, interesting. Simplification of consumer journey. I think you've really simplified that, and I think that's a very interesting catchphrase, because sometimes too much data overcomplicates life, and
yes. Actually, and you don't know what to do with it. How does it really impact, and how do we really move the consumer forward? Because ultimately you are in the game of giving great consumer experiences to consumers, right? So I think that's the key.
And out of curiosity, Anushri, you referred that you're using a tool, mScannet. How has that changed your way of dealing with e-commerce situations? Any interesting offtake from the insights which our tool is giving and which has helped you?
I think agility and getting the right teams accountable for the different missing pieces. And we typically follow that CAMS framework when it comes to e-commerce, right? So it's availability, it's promos, it's pricing, it's media, it's search, it's advertising. All of those actually are almost like different parts of a graphic equalizer. You have to really modulate each of these parts in a way such that you are able to kind of really move the consumer in a journey which is valuable to the organization as well as to the consumer. So I think what's really changed is for example, if there is a campaign which is live and historically we've seen that a particular campaign like this requires X amount of stock cover. I think that those things have become really easy for us. What's really impacting conversions? For example, if it's a competition pricing promo, how do we really alter that? Or how do we really tap into newer need states that are emerging on the platform through different kinds of keywords which can then be incorporated in our campaigns. So I think those are things that have become really probably just at a touch of a button or on a dashboard. So earlier, what used to happen, like again going back to the point of breaking data and digital silos, the fact that there was data, but it was lying in probably in silos with different teams in different places. Now, if you are able to kind of really see it in a single view, you are able to connect the dots. You exactly know which part is not working in the entire mix that essentially impacts your business. So I think it's become more agile. Newer habits have been formed, newer ways of working have happened, uh, quick decisions have happened. I think we've also, and I think that's a calculation that we're in the process of doing, that did we really end up saving some money or drive more efficiencies as we, and or probably even drive more effectiveness as we went about. So I think it's early days still, but the conversation is on how do we really be there when the consumer needs it in the most efficient and effective manner, when it comes to our products, when it comes to our advertising, when it comes to consumer journeys, when it comes to consumer experiences that the consumer actually expects from large brands like ours.
So I think two takeaways from my side, Anushri. I think two words which shine out. One is agility, one is simplicity. I think very interesting. And sometimes all of us tend to overcomplicate things,
Yes.
which also impacts agility. And I think right now, because of the boom in D2C, in the boom in e-commerce, I think agility and simplicity. I think those are the two key takeaways I take from this conversation. Thank you so much, Anushri, for taking time out of this for this discussion.
But one more thing that I wanted to talk about, which I
Sure.
forgot I should have added in the earlier point, is the fact that when we have data in one single repository or one single source, I think that entire piece of what we don't know, which is probably the fourth quadrant of the Johari window, actually becomes apparent that, oh, these are possibilities, things that we never even thought about is possible or is impacting consumer journeys or our business is actually becoming a little apparent. So I think that's one of the key findings or key points that emerged as we started to work with mScanit and mFilterit.
No, thank you so much, Anushri. I appreciate that. It takes me back to my MBA days, Johari window, and I remember that class distinctly. But thank you so much for taking time out and giving your insights on how e-commerce has changed during this whole 2 years. Thank you, and have a great day ahead.